In this video, I'll give you a 3-step system how to maximize your score when taking pretty much any certifications test. As they say, good to the last drop, except in taking certifications. So let's look at it this way. The day's come, you studied your tail off. You've reviewed all the materials for your studies, and you're confident that there's nothing that you don't understand. You've left no stone unturned. You've been curious, you have worked to review everything. But how you go about taking the test can ultimately mean the difference between passing and failure. I've observed this myself. You know, the good news is for these Adobe tests, and specifically what I am talking about, but really this advice applies to taking any certification. These tests have 2 hours. They used to have 1 hour and a half, now they have 2 hours. But remember that 2 hours spent in the wrong way means 2 hours waste. So I'd like to review what are these 3 steps and how to utilize them to maximize the score on the certifications that you take. Number 1, triage. Number 2, deep dive. Number 3, review. So each one of these is a round of taking the test. You're going to go through pretty much every question on each one of these rounds. In other words, we're taking a 2-hour test, a 120-minute test, and we're dividing into roughly 3 different segments. Segment 1 is triage, should be about, 30 to 40 minutes. Section 2 or review 2, round 2 is deep dive, and that's going to take another, roughly 40, 50, 60 minutes, somewhere in there. You can even spend an hour on that. And then the final segment being review, 30 to 40 minutes. And I give these numbers as rough numbers just because there's no set value to each one of them. You're gonna go through, you're gonna find what works exactly for you, but these are general guidelines. Triage, deep dive, and review. Let's dig into each one of these. So number 1 is triage. If you've seen the videos of winter accidents in the United States, on the interstate, people going high speed in the middle of a winter storm, you're kind of getting the drift that's not necessarily ideal. We call them pileups. And it's a good reason to not drive in the winter. However, I understand there's plenty of people that do still need to drive in the winter. When these pileups happen, cars just keep slamming into each other over and over and over again because, again, you can't see, you can't stop because you're in an especially slippery area. These first responders arrive to the scene, the police, the fire, the medical. They quickly work to assess every person that's been involved in this pileup, this accident. This is called a triage. They are focusing on those who are most critically injured, those who need medical attention the first. Now, in some ways, I kind of hate to use that as an example because we're talking about certifications. Getting a certification is a good thing. But I find it very applicable because in this first round of taking your test, you want to work through every question quickly. You want to assess the big picture. What are you looking at as far as this test? What are you up against? You might get that pit in your stomach, or you might feel like, yeah, I got a good command of this test. Either way, answer the questions quickly. Make sure you do select an answer to every question. But there are going to be those questions, and I find it to be usually about a third of the test. 20 questions usually for me. These questions that seem super tough. Mark those for review. You're going to come back to those in round number 2. And again, I suggest taking 30 to 40 minutes, plus or minus, on this round. It's usually enough to get every question read and a reasonable answer formulated for each one. Number 2 is a deep dive. Now that you have a picture of what you're up against, again, good feeling or bad feeling, doesn't matter. You're taking the test at this moment. Now take the next 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and review those marked questions. You can go through and see each one of those that are marked. Spend 2 to 3 minutes on every question. Understand, okay, read them thoroughly. What is it asking? What answers can I eliminate here? Is there any other questions or answers in the rest of the test that might give me clues as far as the answer for this specific question? Take your time on this. These questions are incredibly important and could cost you or gain you this certification. Once you believe you have a good answer formulated for this question, uncheck that mark. So this uncheck that checkbox that says mark for review. Once it's unchecked, you move on to the next question. You work through this. In this round, I find that I usually eliminate about 75% of my questions that have been marked for review. You might, at least again, if you're like me, you'll have about 5 questions still that you have absolutely no clue the answer for. The good news is the passing score for these tests are usually in the 60% range. So 5 questions is not going to mean is not a make it or break it deal at this point, but still keep an eye on the clock. But round number 3, I call this the review round. So we first had the triage round, now we have the deep dive round. Now we are going to we have now entered the final phase of taking this test called the review round. Go back through the entire test, every single question, question 1 through question 60. Reread every question, reread every answer. Try to mentally block out that answer that you have already selected. Did you get the answer correct the first time? If so, great, move on to the next one. But maybe you missed a word or two, and that word or two can completely affect the outcome of this question. If you missed that word or two, then go reread the question, but always remember that your first answer is usually the correct one. Don't forget that. Nothing superstitious there, but it often is the case. This last step, this review round, should use up the balance of your time. So these 3 steps, the triage round, the deep dive, and the review round are the 3 steps that I use in every test that I've taken. And I find that it gives me a comprehensive understanding of the test that allows me to double check myself and also watch the clock in the meantime. The last thing we'd ever want is to run out of time on taking a test. It allows me to give each question the time that it deserves without spending too much time on any one specific area. With that is my tip here for you today. Hope you found it helpful. As always, I appreciate it if you would like this video, if you subscribe to my channel there on YouTube.